Demonstrations and rallies are being held across Israel today as the country marks 500 days since Hamas launched its deadly attacks on October 7th, 2023. Some protesters blocking a busy road in Tel Aviv demanding the return of all the hostages still held by the militant group. Over the weekend, Hamas released 3 more Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. 33 hostages are meant to be released during the first phase of the ceasefire agreement, and as of Saturday, 24 have been freed. On Face the Nation, Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke about efforts to free the remaining hostages.
Under the deal, there are some that are supposed to be released coming up next weekend. We expect that to happen, but we'd like to see them all come out. We're not in favor of waiting weeks and weeks. Now, that may be the process that's in place because of the deal, but we would like to see them all out as soon as possible.
I want to bring in Merissa Khurma now. She's the director of the Middle East program at the Wilson Center. She also previously worked for the office of Prince Ali bin Al Hussein of Jordan and in the Information Bureau at the Embassy of Jordan in Washington. It's wonderful to have you with us today. I just want to kind of reset for our viewers, as we are 500 days into this conflict, that by now many of Hamas's leaders have been killed. The leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon also killed. You got the Assad regime in Syria out. And yet we don't seem any closer today to establishing what a future looks like for Gaza. We've heard some visions from President Trump, but what's your position? What does a feasible plan look like for nations in the region that have a vested interest?
Well, 500 days, after October 7th, we've seen a lot of death and destruction. Over 1,200 Israelis were killed that day, and to date, over 45,000 Palestinians killed as a result of the war in Gaza. President Trump is right about one thing with regards to Gaza. It looks like a demolition site because many of the buildings, churches, mosques, schools, hospitals have been completely destroyed. And yes, he did present a plan to rebuild Gaza, but it is a plan that has been rejected officially by the vast majority of key U.S. allies in the Arab world because it includes the forced displacement of Palestinians. Now, moving forward, what plan can we have for Gaza? Well, first of all, the Arab countries, the Arab leaders will be meeting in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia later this week to discuss a plan forward, to come up with an alternative plan to President Trump's plan in order to present it to both the United States administration and to Israel as a means to move forward. But one thing we know for sure, it does not include the forced displacement of Palestinians. And one other point here to add is that any post-war plan for Gaza has to include the Palestinians. It's very difficult to have both the United States government and Israel accept Hamas at the table, but there are other factions that can be brought forward, and the Palestinian Authority absolutely needs to be empowered, needs to be ready to govern. But the Palestinians have to be at the table, and so far they are not part of these discussions.
And how has the strength or weakness of the Palestinian Authority also played into this? It's encouraging to hear that there will be talks later this week, but is the Palestinian Authority as influential as it once was?
Unfortunately, it is not. And that is one of the reasons why Hamas has been gaining so much momentum, particularly in the West Bank. Less so in Gaza, particularly before October 7th, according to many surveys conducted prior to the attacks. So the further away you go, from Gaza, unfortunately, given the brutality of this war and the destruction that people have witnessed across the region pretty much live on a daily basis, this idea, the ideology of Hamas, of armed resistance, has been resuscitated, has been revived. And you see Hamas officials in the diaspora talking about that as their victory. So that is disconcerting. And that is why the Israelis and the American administration do not want to see a role for Hamas in Gaza. But that doesn't mean that the Palestinians should be locked out completely, because they are part of that, and the Palestinian Authority has to play a role. But there's a lot of very important work to do, including by the Arab states, to ensure that Palestinian Authority is capable of governing in a post-war scenario.
Yeah, very, very important points. Merissa Khurma, we appreciate your insight on this topic today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.